Hey friends, welcome to the Canyon Pathways podcast, where we invite you to live like a son and lead like a father. Canyon Pathways is a global community of men on the journey from the striving of servanthood to the freedom of sonship as we traverse the canyon that is midlife leadership. My name is Noel Bouché, and I'm the founder and part of the leadership team for this venture, and I'll be your guide throughout this podcast as we explore and discover what it means to live like a son so we can lead like a compassionate father. Glad to be with you as always. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Canyon Pathways podcast, a community of men learning to live like sons in this canyon of midlife leadership so we can lead like fathers. We've got two types of episodes here at the pod. The first type is what we call a field note episode, which is what we are engaging in right now, where we look at one of our field note essays, a treatment of a word that we believe embodies a concept that's central to this journey into sonship, of living like a son of God, the move from servanthood to sonship. And the second type is a conversation episode, where we bring one or more brothers from the Canyon Pathways community around the world to not only sit and go deeper with that concept, that field note, but also share and dive into their story and their journey and have a conversation that always elicits gems and pearls of wisdom from men in this community. So we've got one on the heels of this incredible conversation with Luke Smith, going to be leading a dialogue with three guys who are core to this community and stepping into a leadership role in a new way in this season as spiritual directors. So Sherman Bradley, Jason Lee, Paul Kimball, going to sit down with Luke and talk about this subject, this journey, this approach, this thing that we're going to look at today, which is spiritual direction. Spiritual direction. I wonder what comes to your mind when you hear that phrase. A few of us are very familiar with the concept and the relationship and the idea and the experience of spiritual direction, perhaps are a spiritual director. For many of us, though, it's a bit of a foreign concept. And I think there's a reason for that. I know for me it was. I kind of vaguely knew the phrase, I think, years ago, just over time, hearing it, knowing there were people who were serving as spiritual directors, certainly historically bumping up against authors, writers over the centuries who had, I perceived, I learned, I read, served as spiritual directors to others, not just ministers, not just priests, not just a pastor, not a prophet or an apostle, a spiritual director. And so I was vaguely familiar with it, but it kind of got, the vagueness of my familiarity was brought to light when, this is 15 years ago, I was out on the West Coast, and with a friend, my wife and I were visiting, and she said to us that she had just finished a process of being trained to be a spiritual director. And as soon as she said it, I just kind of was like, tell me more. I need to hear about this. What does this mean? And as she shared more about it, my appetite to know more, my interest in knowing, but also experiencing this thing called spiritual direction, being in a relationship with a spiritual director, perhaps serving as a spiritual director for others, really kind of grew. Yeah, it was dormant, but a seed was planted in my heart. And it was many years later when the community that is now Canyon Pathways began to emerge as we just step by step followed the Father's purposes that he was revealing to us, that we realized retreats are fundamental, to step away from the front lines, as it were, of life, to get out of the grind, to gain a different perspective, to rest, and to, in that resting, receive in a new way. It became very clear to us very quickly that spiritual direction had to be tied to that experience in this Canyon Pathways community, that resting and receiving in an immersive experience like a retreat needed a way to be deepened and walked out and watered and tended to beyond the retreat, after the retreat, coming out of the retreat. And so we launched our spiritual direction pathway. And it's been incredible. It's been life-changing for me and now dozens and dozens of men around the world. And we are just getting started, quite literally, as we bring on these three men I just mentioned to serve as Canyon Pathways spiritual director. So let's jump into the field note. The field is a little different. We're not diving deep into a word, but we're kind of just peeling back a layer on this thing called spiritual direction. What is it? What are its basics? What are the fundamental contours of it? How does it differ from other practices, other experiences, other things we might be familiar with? So let's dive into the field note right now. Here's our field note on spiritual direction. Spiritual direction. I was sitting recently with a 40-something business executive discussing the challenges of the marketplace, the burden of leadership, and the choices he was making to navigate his organization through a significant season. We discussed the role of consultants, executive coaches, and other advisors in successfully guiding a company through strategic planning and execution. But honestly, what I really need is someone to help me integrate the different areas of my life, personal, professional, spiritual, he said to me. To be not just the executive, but the husband, the father, the friend, the man that I want to be. Enter spiritual direction. Many of us are familiar with important functions like teaching, discipleship, counseling, mentorship. But spiritual direction is a bit of a lost art, a discipline that is at once from time immemorial, but erroneously viewed as antiquated, desired, but lost in the milieu of modern living. In a world awash with control, hierarchy, expertise, and algorithms, spiritual direction emerges as an enterprise at once countercultural and spiritually relevant. In short, spiritual direction is an interpersonal relationship in which one person helps another person discern what God is doing and saying. It is one person, free of spiritual pride, well aware of their limitations, walking with and listening for another to determine what the Spirit is communicating to that Son of God. A qualified spiritual director is both a safe and competent person, spiritually tested and thus prepared to walk with another through the canyons of life, all the while attuned to the other's circumstances, personality, and spiritual needs. We believe that to live as sons, we need other sons walking with us, listening for us, perceiving what the Spirit is doing in and through us. It is through this shared sonship that we experience the Father and hear His voice speaking to us. Brothers, sons, this is your invitation to new direction, together. Hear, my son, and be wise, and direct your heart in the way. Proverbs 23:19. There's our field note essay on spiritual direction, and just gives you a little bit of an intro into what we are about, what we are doing, what we're cultivating here at Canyon Pathways through our spiritual direction offering, and some of the contours, like I said, of what spiritual direction is and has been historically. One of the things that's very personal to me, right when we were launching Canyon Pathways, right when this community and this mission were coming together in 2021, was I had just summited Kilimanjaro with my wife. It's a bucket list item for her, and we successfully summited. I got hammered at the top by altitude sickness, but that's a story for another time. But one of the things that journey, 5 days up the mountain and 2 down, it showed me as I watched not just the entire team, all the people that made it possible for us to do that. Like any endeavor, there's people that are making it possible for us to do the things we do. And in this case, there were porters, many porters, and guides, and we each had a guide. And our main guide, Charles, was incredible for me to watch because Charles is an incredible guide, an incredible man, remarkable person of faith, and very talented, and just was amazing to watch just because of that. But as we, began from camp to camp, summiting the mountain, watching him do what he did, it really gave me a picture. It became an illustration for me of what spiritual directors, and specifically what a spiritual director does, in a way that's different than some of the things we're accustomed to, some of the processes we are accustomed to, some of the modes of leading that we're accustomed to, especially in the information age. I mean, we live saturated with information, and so we do have a tendency to, even in our spiritual journeys, and in our spiritual formation and in our congregational life to kind of move and bend towards information, teaching in that sense, teaching information, providing solutions, finding a problem, applying the correct understanding, wisdom, and that obviously, a question has its place. But there is a hierarchical element to that. A teacher is teaching the student. Students are you're going to get to a certain place. Here's the curriculum. Here's how you get there. You need to know this for the test. You need to know this for life. The teacher's job is to make sure that they know it and can utilize the information and apply it. And that becomes, for a lot of us, our lives. It becomes part of the canyon of midlife leadership because we're constantly solving problems. We're constantly providing information. We're constantly getting the information we need to provide the information, to teach, to lead, to give the answers. And for some of us, that might be a very highly controlled environment. For others of us, we just fall into control for various reasons. But that is very different than spiritual direction. And it's different than climbing a mountain. It's different than what I saw Charles do, because here we were, the climbers. We selected the date. We selected the mountain. We selected the route. We were the ones who said, we're going to climb this to this peak, with this particular route. There's different routes to choose. Well, that was our job. Charles, as our guide, was obviously his job to get us there safely, but also to keep us safe on the mountain. How? By attending to us, by paying attention to us. And yes, we learned a lot from him on the way up about the mountain itself, about the topography, the flora, the fauna, the climate, the nature, the history of the mountain. But that was just an afterthought. That was just, we didn't even realize we were learning because we were just conversing while we were walking on this route that we had selected. And he was the one pointing things out, taking our blood pressure, looking at our heart rate, making sure we were eating, how was our body functioning? Did we have headaches? How were we acclimatizing? He was paying attention to us, all the while walking with us, all the while putting his foot right where we were putting our feet, showing us where to put our hand perhaps as we had to go through a couple scrambles, showing us where to walk, what steps to avoid, and some of them especially more perilous parts of the journey on the mountain. But he was attending to us. It was his job to get us to the summit, even though he summited as well. And it just became a very beautiful thing as I felt him attending to me as a climber and to the two of us. So it became this kind of metaphor, a template for me of what a spiritual director does. A spiritual director doesn't say, you need to go here. You need to climb this mountain. You need to take this route. You need to get to these camps. You need to start. You need to stop. It's a spiritual director is walking with you on your journey. It is not hierarchical. It is not controlled. It is fluid. It's relational. It's attentive. And that's one of the things that we've seen at Canyon Pathways as we stepped into this method of living, this mode of relating, not just to each other as a spiritual director to a spiritual directee, but of relating to the Father and realizing that the Father is with us wherever you are in your journey. Every spiritual directee is looking for something. What is the Father saying to me right now? What is the Holy Spirit doing? What's he? I don't quite know. The valley I'm in is shadowy. The canyon is dark. I don't know when I'm going to get out of it. I don't know what's on the other side exactly, though I have a sense of the direction. But maybe my direction's off. I need someone to walk with me. I need someone to look and listen with me, for me, and in conjunction with me. That's what a spiritual director does. And it's a beautiful relationship. Walking in this has been instructive for me. I have both given and received, freely received and then freely given in this journey of first being a spiritual director and now walking as a director with others and now seeing how this community is stepping into this even more fully. We have more men desiring to not only walk through a spiritual direction relationship, but also to get certified and to get further training to be a spiritual director, even after decades, in some cases, of pastoring and teaching, now stepping into this new way. It requires new spiritual muscle memory to relate. So, many of us are perhaps familiar with some of the authors, at least that my mind goes to when I think of spiritual direction: Eugene Peterson, Richard Foster, Henry Nouwen, and historically many, many other giants of the faith. Francois Fenelon is a big one for me, who literally, as a priest, walked as a spiritual director for many, including the royal family in France in the 17th century. And what many of them will say roughly, to put language around this very fluid thing that is not concrete in any way, but spiritual direction at its root is the act of paying attention to God, calling attention to God, being attentive to what the Spirit of God is doing in a person's life or in the circumstances or in this situation. And it is inherently a relational act of listening together. That's what a spiritual director is fundamentally, a trained listener, to be able to listen to the Holy Spirit with you, to converse, to dialogue, to let things emerge, and then perceive what the Spirit of God is saying into that. It's a relationship, and it's an experience that takes some time. I've experienced it, and I've walked with many, many men in midlife leadership who are accustomed to, being in an executive leadership position where, hey, I want to be efficient, get this done. Tell me what I need to know. Tell me how to do it. Give me the right tools, and let me go do. And spiritual direction moves at a different pace. It's organic. It is necessarily requires moving at the pace that the Holy Spirit is moving at. It requires listening, not just talking or doing and acting. It requires being attentive and retuning our spiritual ears, the eyes and ears of our heart, to see what's happening. And it can take a little while to feel like anything's happening at all. I've been many weeks into relationships with guys who are like, I don't know what I'm getting out of this. And oftentimes right on the heels of that, perhaps the next week or sometime shortly thereafter, like, oh, I get it. This is what God is saying to me. Oh, I now see patterns in my life that I didn't see before. I am now perceiving the voice of the Father in a still small voice. I'm perceiving, I'm feeling, I'm picking up, getting attuned to the whispers of this gentle Father who loves me in a way that I couldn't when I was moving at speed, when I was hastily barreling through responsibilities and obligations and duties. So that's spiritual direction, you might say, in a nutshell. And you might say, well, that's great. What's the fruit? And we're going to jump right into it. I want to play a couple clips here of guys in the Canyon Pathways community who have walked through and experienced spiritual direction with us in a way that's helped them live more fully like a son of God, stepping out of the grind of servanthood into the restfulness of being a son and heir. So here's a couple CP brothers, my friends: Matt Menendez, a commercial pilot; Thomas Hedden, a lawyer and pastor; Johnny Yan, an IT professional. Here's what these guys had to say about their experience.
This is Matt Menendez. I live in Austin, Texas. Just wanted to take a moment to share with you a little bit about my experience going through spiritual direction with Canyon Pathways. For me, it was about a year ago, and it was just very helpful for me to take an intentional deep dive into how God has oriented me as a son and a man. There was, quite frankly, some ways or some things about me that I learned through the process that I had not fully acknowledged previously. It was insightful in that way, and it's helped shape the way that I lead at home, whether it be as a husband or father, and even the way that I interact and lead at work. And ultimately, just helped me to help me to understand my calling more thoroughly.
My name is Thomas Hedden. I am a pastor and an attorney. When I first started spiritual direction, I was at the beginning of both of those paths. And going through spiritual direction was the exact thing I needed at the time. What I loved about it is it was an opportunity for me to approach the Father on my own behalf with someone who was listening with me, who was seeking with me, who was searching with me, and who was aware of my blind spots, aware of my shortcomings in a safe way, in a way that allowed me to take an inventory and an assessment of myself and see where I needed to improve, where I needed to go easy on myself, and where I needed to continue to seek the Father. I can't put into words how important the time was. I can't put into words how impactful it was for my life. But it is without a doubt one of the most imperative things that the Lord has led me on. It was like receiving a warm massage when I went through spiritual direction. So if you have any questions about it, then feel free to reach out to me directly. I wholeheartedly recommend it.
I had the blessing of doing the spiritual direction program with Kenyan Pathways back in spring 2024. There are a couple of ways the program impacted me. First, my guide, Noel, worked with me on a few assessments like the Clifton Strengths and allowed me to become aware of my blind spots. To date, I often check back on my notes, especially when I'm dealing with conflictual situations. Second, my profound conversations during the spiritual direction kind of liberated me to be a better son of God. I went on to do more volunteer work than I thought I would do prior to going through the program. Finally, this spiritual direction program led me to go on a Kenyan Pathways retreat last year, and I made new friends with great brothers whom I would have never met if I did not take that leap of faith and do this spiritual direction. So if there is a brother out there who is thinking about signing up for a spiritual direction and maybe on the fence, I would say pray about it, trust God, He will walk with you, and you have nothing to lose.
There you go, from 3 mature leaders describing how they benefited from spiritual direction. So hope that is enticing as you listen to that, and something resonated with you, and that it will help you if you are part of the CP community and have experienced the immersive experience of a retreat with us, that you consider working with one of our spiritual directors on our 10-session spiritual direction journey, where we sit more deeply with what does it mean to live like a son, identifying where we fall into these elder brother symptoms of servanthood and striving and anger and exhaustion, and coming back to the table, being invited back to the table, not as a servant and hired hand, but as a son and an heir, and then walking into reclaiming that sonship more deeply and integrating these things into our life, integrating into our daily lives the things that we're starting to discover through retreating and learning to rest and receive as a son, remembering and then seeing it woven more deeply into the fabric of our lives. And then finally moving into leading like a father, learning how to be the father, to step into, as Nowan said, to step into that role of being the father, to become like the father, indeed, to be an heir of the father and father others by covering them and inviting them and investing in them and speaking words of life over them. So consider it. It will be a blessing, no question, and that's why we're here at Canyon Pathways, to walk with you through the canyon of midlife leadership, so we come out as a son, fully formed, as an heir, a co-heir with Jesus of this Father who loves us deeply and profoundly. Hope you've been encouraged by this and enjoyed the episode. You can check out the show notes. There's some resources there and links for you to look at, as well as some information on our spiritual direction process. Don't miss the next episode, because this is where we're really going to sit with this and learn what you're going to experience and how you're going to experience it with Canyon Pathways, as you listen to Luke and Sherman Bradley, Jason Lee, and Paul Kimball, and more about their leadership in this global community called Canyon Pathways. Subscribe so you catch all the episodes when they drop, as we continue to develop a language of sonship through this podcast. Thanks to the team at Maroon Harpoon for producing this episode, and to our donors who make this venture possible. And as always, thank you for being a part of this Canyon Pathways community as we together live like sons and lead like fathers.